Hello again and welcome to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. I'm Dave, and in this video I want to talk about a physical aspect of the guitar, the way that it's built, the strength of the neck, and particularly headstock breaks and how and why they happen. I've seen quite a few posts on Facebook recently like this. People showing pictures of a guitar that's had some sort of damage to it. It's probably been dropped or taken a knock and the headstock's come off. Now, this isn't particularly unusual. Gibsons do have a bit of a reputation, and what I want to do in this video is take a bit of a deep dive and explain why this is the case. You know, is this people just hating on Gibson, or is it something else at play here that makes the guitar, some guitars, more susceptible to damage? So help you understand how the guitar is built and help you to understand how you need to look after your guitar, and if the worst happens, what you need to do. Now, this video, like a lot of my videos, there's going to be a lot of talking. This is an explaining video. I get a lot of comments from people being very negative, slagging me off, saying just shut up and play the guitar. No, the point of this channel is it's meant to be educational, it's meant to teach you things. So if you want a guitar playing video, plenty of other videos out there on YouTube, but for now let's talk about the guitar, the way it's built, and get into the aspect of headstock breaks. I'm starting this video holding my Gibson Les Paul because this is sort of a typical example of the sort of guitar where people will be posting pictures on the internet of broken headstocks. Like I say, Gibson do have a bit of a reputation. What I think it's best to do is actually show you some pictures. So why don't you join me over at my desk, the pen and the paper, and let's get into some aspects of guitar design. Okay, before we get started, I just want to remind you I'm a guitar player. I'm never claiming to be a graphic designer or an artist, and this is not an arts and crafts YouTube channel, so forgive me for any roughness on the diagrams, but hopefully they'll get the point across and explain what I'm talking about. So we start with the basics and what the construction of a guitar neck actually looks like. You know, basically the luthier will take a block of wood and then we'll carve away or cut away a certain amount of it to give us the head, to give us the heel. So all of this would get cut away, all of this would get cut away, all of this would get cut away. And that leaves us with a heel that could go onto the guitar body, the main length of the neck, and then the headstock angled back there like that. And obviously fingerboard on top of this with a truss rod and whatnot inside of there. We would think about what that looks like from the side, from a side view. So that's the basic block of wood, and we would cut away the heel of the length of the neck, and then the headstock down like that. You know, obviously all of this cut away, all of this cut away, and we've got the grain of the wood, you know, going lengthways along there and along here. And the point of having this angled headstock is to give us the break angle over the nut. So when the strings are coming along the fingerboard, we need to get some sort of angle so that the open strings ring out nice and cleanly over the nut. If this was just like flat, it would be like not fretting a note properly, and it would just sound really, really dull. So there is a reason for having the headstock angled back like this. It gives you that break angle. So you've got the strings going along like that. Now that works along the length of the guitar neck because you've got this compressive force going on, and the grain gives you strength against the tension of the string. If you think about what's happening here in the headstock end, the strings are actually going at an angle to the grain. They're not going along the grain, they're going at an angle to it, which means it's not as strong. And if something happens where the headstock gets hit, which is more likely because it's coming out at an angle, if you rest the guitar up against a wall, if it gets dropped and it's likely going to land on the headstock first, this is a weak area. And that's, if you look at any pictures of, if you Google for, Gibson headstock brakes, the brake's always going to be around this point, because this part of the neck has taken an impact, and then that's broken. Now, guitar manufacturers can deal with this in a couple of ways. So if you think about your basic neck, like this, what they can do is fit what's called a volute. Fit, actually, it's part of the carve, so they leave a little bit of wood right at the nut end. It just adds a little bit of mass, makes this a little bit stronger. It's certainly not a silver bullet, but it does help, but it's certainly not a solution to the problem. The other thing that you might see is we'll still have like an angled headstock, but the angle would be much shallower. It's enough to give us a brake angle there, but that angle is bigger than the angle that you'd get here. It also means if the neck's at a slightly shallower angle, if you think what the guitar looks like with the neck attached to the body, if you put that guitar down flat, or if it falls flat, this part of the headstock is actually lower than the bottom of the body, so this is more likely to take an impact. With a shallower neck angle on the headstock, where it meets the neck, means this will be a little bit higher up. So if it does drop, or if you put it down flat, this isn't going to be making contact with the ground quite so easily. The way that necks can be made is much more like the Fender approach, where the headstock is actually pretty flat relative to the fingerboard, and they employ things like a string tree to force the string down where it needs to be pulled a bit lower to give you that brake angle on the strings. More of an issue for the treble strings, but that's how Fender approached it. And I think that actually says a lot about the relative approaches of Gibson and Fender. Gibson are a much more traditional manufacturer. If you look at like what the Les Paul looks like compared to the semi-hollow guitars of the day, and how they look like compared to classical guitars and acoustic guitars, this was much more of a construction method in very traditional instruments. Fender, if you look at the Stratocaster and the Telecaster, a bit of a departure from the sort of guitars that were around. So using a different headstock design that solves the problem, it is much more typically Fender, and whereas Gibson's is much more traditional sort of approach. All of that, though, is based around the idea of having this block of wood and cutting out the neck in one go. Now, another approach which manufacturers could take is take your length of wood and carve out something more like this. So not actually carving a headstock at all, just a straight piece of timber, and then making what's called a scarf joint. So we'll make a cut there. So what you end up with then is with two pieces of timber, the main body of the neck. Then this could be taken out, flipped to 180 degrees, and you have something which can go at an angle. And then what you've got is a piece of timber where the grain runs in that direction and runs in that direction, so it's much closer in line to the direction of the force going along the strings. A lot of people look down on the scarf joint, but personally I prefer it. It is a much stronger construction. You can see, if you've got the wood hasn't been painted, which typically would be the case, you can see the scarf joint, so it's very visual. Maybe if you want an uninterrupted piece of wood, the scarf joint maybe is not so visually appealing, but it is much stronger because you've got the grain going in the direction of the pull of the strings. And if you combine that by in carving by having a volute as well, it makes it even stronger. Just talking about neck strength though, let's just talk briefly, not so much about the way the headstock is built, but just the way that the guitar neck itself is constructed from a piece of wood. So our starting point typically, would be a log. A tree gets felled, and then out of that tree, a sawmill that would cut out usable lengths of wood, which would then go to the luthier, who could start to take those and make guitars out of them. But let's think about what that looks like from the cross section of the wood. So if you think we're looking at a log of wood, you've got in there, drawn very badly, but it's enough to give you an idea for what's going on. You've got all the growth lines, these concentric circles in the wood where the tree has grown over time. And when the wood is cut up at the timber yard, then it's chopped into various logs. And think about what happens in terms of where a plank of wood is cut from that log. So I'll just draw a couple here. So we could cut a piece there, we could cut pieces across, but look at what happens in the cross section. So in that example there, we've got a plank of wood where the grain generally runs that way, and this example side, we've got something where the grain generally runs in a more vertical pattern. That is what's known as flat sawn, and that is what's known as quarter sawn. And this makes a difference in terms of the strength, just the way that the grain runs along the neck. Generally speaking, flat sawn is not as inherently strong as quarter sawn, just because of the way that the fibres in the wood and the grain lines sort of line up relative to the force of the strings along the neck. But that said, flat sawn isn't weak. If you've got a decent piece of timber, flat sawn is plenty strong enough. I remember I used to have a Strat years ago that had the flattest of flat sawn one-piece maple necks, and I never had a peep of bother with it. It was absolutely fine. I didn't do anything crazy like take it from one climate to another, but it was it's absolutely fine. And likewise, I've got guitars with quarter sawn necks, and I haven't noticed them being significantly better or stronger. But like I say, I don't have extreme use cases for my guitars. These don't just deal with the strains of where the forces of the strings are along the neck, though. They also just add to the general strength of the guitar neck and protecting it against things like twisting and lateral twisting and torsion and things like that might damage the neck. And there are other things that we can do to strengthen the neck. So if you look at a neck just looking down over, so you will always have the truss rod running down the middle of the neck, and we can use this to adjust the neck relief, where we basically adjust how much the neck is bending in response to the force of the strings. And this is about making the neck playable. So there's a channel cut out in the neck, and a truss rod is inserted in there. And a truss rod can be adjusted either from the neck end or the body end. Body end, like on this Fender Telecaster, a little bit more awkward to adjust because often you need to take the neck off to be able to get at it. Although nowadays some manufacturers are using what are called spoke wheel truss rods, which are much more accessible. So if that was this was a Fender neck, like my Telecaster, this would be the body end, and this would be the headstock end. Gibson's, with the examples we were looking at, are the other way around, where the truss rod adjustment is actually at the headstock end. That's a lot more accessible, but bear in mind that you need to take wood away to give you to give you that truss rod channel to get the Allen key in. So that's taking wood away, which can introduce a little bit of weakness. But going back to the concept of the general strength of the neck, regardless of which way around the truss rod is fitted, what you might also encounter is in a guitar is just a couple of carbon fibre rods inserted, one either side of the truss rod. These add general strength to the guitar. They're not about making the guitar stronger in terms of neck relief, but they do help a lot with things like torsion and protecting the guitar neck against twisting. And if you're really concerned about the general strength of the guitar neck, then the choice of timber can make a difference. Using something like roasted maple or baked maple, as opposed to just regular maple, because of the way the roasting process, just the chemistry of the wood, it does make it stronger. Anyway, back to the headstock issue. So yeah, where the truss rod access is can make a difference to the amount of wood that's available around the headstock end, that potential weakness. Another thing to consider is if you've got a locking nut. So if you think about like a Floyd Rose locking nut, you've got the fingerboard, or you've got the neck, and go into a headstock of some description, and at the 0 fret you will have the Floyd Rose locking nut. Now ideally that will be fitted by screws through the top of the neck. However, there are cases where I've seen your Floyd Rose locking nut is actually bolted from behind. That's the case on this old Strat of mine. It's got a very old Floyd on it. I'm not so happy about that method of attaching them, because you are actually taking quite a lot of wood out of the neck to put those bolt holes in, so the bolts can go through to fix the locking nut. That's not so much a concern for me because I've got a Strat style guitar with a flat headstock, but it is a bit more concern maybe if you've got a guitar with an angled headstock and the Floyd Rose locking nut has been fitted from using bolts from the back, because that is, like I say, is removing timber. Anything that removes timber effectively is removing strength. Okay, so diagrammatically then hopefully that gives you an insight into the way the guitar neck is built. Okay, so hopefully from that you've got a better understanding now about the way that these things are built and why I'm a little bit more careful with this guitar than I might be with my Strat, because this is the way that this guitar is built. It is more likely to be susceptible to damage on the headstock. You know, if I dropped my Strat onto the headstock, touch wood, it would survive. If I dropped the Les Paul, I'd like to hope it would survive, but you know, as a betting man, I'd say that this is more likely to take some damage for all the reasons I was explaining before. So if you've got a guitar with an angled headstock, if you're looking to buy a guitar with an angled headstock, or any guitar really, just understanding the way that it's built, I think would be useful to help you to know what you might need to keep your eye open for, to how to look after it. At the end of the day, these things are tools. You know, they're working instruments, and you shouldn't have to treat them with kid gloves. You should be able to just go out and use them for their primary purpose, and you should be able to focus on making music with them rather than focusing on protecting it as an instrument, if you see what I mean. But the thing with guitars, and I'll probably go off at a slight tangent here, the idea of like looking after your guitar and not abusing it. I mean, this guitar is covered in dings and scratches, and the lacquer is all cracked. I'd say I suppose with a small d there is damage to it, but it's 55 years old. You know, it's had a good hard working life, and a bit of damage is to be expected. That guitar there it's got some damage on it. That was put there by some people. Well, most of the damage on that was put there by people at the Fender factory, because it's a relic. And people often talk about relics as, oh, it's stupid. I could just go out and, like, you know, bash my guitar up. That's not the thing. even a relic guitar, it's not just been beaten up. You know, you see all these internet memes of people dragging guitars behind cars on gravel roads and things like that. No, the idea of like a good relicking job, the sort of thing that the Fender Custom Shop do or Gibson Murphy Lab do, it's meant to emulate the wear and tear that you get from years of playing. So there's certain aspects of like damage, if you like, on this guitar, which I know is just like natural relicking. I can kind of see echoed on the Strat that was done through a intentional relicking, because it's mimicking like play wear. So the idea of, oh, I could just like throw my guitar around, I'll just call it relicking. No, never abuse your guitar. These things need your respect. They serve you as a tool, as a way of making music, a way of unleashing your creativity, a way of writing songs. You should never abuse them. You treat them with respect. Expect that they will take some natural wear and tear, but don't abuse them. And that brings us back to the point of there's aspects of the guitar that, like, you know, neck breaks and things. The guitar shouldn't be susceptible to that kind of damage under normal playing conditions, but if you're careless or if you abuse the guitar, then it's more likely to happen. So being careful with the guitar, when you take it off, if you're not playing, put it in a stand. Don't just like lean it against the wall or lean it against the amplifier. Anything where you put the guitar down and it's not in a strong position, like being in a stand, gravity will not be your friend. Sooner or later it'll slip, it'll fall over, it'll land on the headstock, and chances are you're going to end up causing some damage. So, you know, just be sensible, respect your gear. If you're playing a guitar when you're standing up, fit a set of strap locks. Now, this guitar being a vintage guitar, I didn't want to fit like modern strap locks to it, but what I have done is I've put some little rubber ring, like, you know, the Grolsch bottle top type strap locks on, just something to stop the strap from slipping off. So when I'm standing up playing this, I can just concentrate on playing the guitar. I'm not having to concentrate on making sure that the guitar is securely, or the strap is securely fastened to the guitar. I know that the strap locks are going to hold it in place. Just something you can do to reduce the risk of the guitar having an accident. And if you're traveling with a guitar, put it in a suitably protective case, and particularly if it's got an angled headstock, make sure that there's plenty of support to keep the neck high enough up in the case that that end of the headstock isn't touching the body of the case itself, so that if anything happens, if the back of the case takes any sort of impact, it's going to be going through the neck support, and it's going to be dissipating all of the shock and the impact through that neck support, and any impact goes into the neck of the guitar rather than that part of the guitar being in contact with the case and then it snaps. What if the worst does happen? What if, despite your best efforts, something unfortunate happens to the guitar and you have a headstock break? Most importantly, don't panic. I know in the heat of the moment it will be the worst thing you've ever seen. It will be the most distressing thing. I don't care what horror movies you've seen, that will be the most distressing thing you have ever seen in your life. That's understandable if your pride and joy has taken a knock and a headstock break. Yeah, in the moment it's awful, but to be honest, to an experienced guitar repairer, luthier, guitar tech, that is not the worst repair they could be asked to do. I think if you went to anybody who repairs guitars professionally and asked them what's the most common sort of like structural repair that they have to do to a guitar, they would say headstock breaks. And because it's relatively common, it's a known quantity for them, it's easier for them to fix. Some repairs, like particularly on like an acoustic guitar, if the top's starting to split or the bracing and the inside is coming off, those sort of conditions are going to vary from guitar to guitar and might be a little bit more of an unusual challenge for the guitar repairer. Guitar headstock breaks on Gibson style guitars, and guarantee whoever you take your guitar to, they'll done plenty of similar repairs, so don't panic, it's a known quantity. And the thing is, when they do the repair, particularly if it's a nice clean break, the guitar will actually come back stronger. Getting some glue in there actually helps to strengthen it. And in some cases, what the guitar repairer might do is put some little splints in there that actually run in the direction that you want the grain to run, rather than it being like in line with the neck. And it just makes the guitar headstock and that vulnerable area at the top of the neck, it just actually does make it stronger. There's two sides of that coin though. If you're buying a guitar and it's had a headstock break, the person selling the guitar will probably say what I've just said to you. Oh yeah, well it's had a headstock break, but hey, these things happen. You know, it's just as strong, if not stronger than it was before. I'm not going to offer you any money off the price. You know, I might offer you a tiny bit, but it's not, you know, they're not going to knock loads of money off the price because it's been damaged. If you come to sell a guitar that's had a headstock break, I know for sure that the person buying it will ignore everything that I've just said and say, well, it's been damaged, it's been repaired, it's not original, I'm taking a risk on it, and they will offer you a lower price. Now, I used to have an SG. Those of you who've been with the channel for a while, you might remember I used to have a 1974 SG, and that one, again, luckily had never had a headstock break. When I went to sell it, I took it to a dealer who is really straight, really honest dealer. I trust them. And when I came to sell it, they had a general look at the guitar and hummed and hawed and checked all the fretwork and stuff. And then they went and got a black light, your UV light. And so what we want to look for is if there's any signs that there's been respray or anything around here that might be hiding a repair. And I know that it was partly that they wanted, because when they sold the guitar they had to be honest, but I know that if they did find anything, it would have been, yeah, well, there's some damage there, we're going to offer you less. That's just the way the guitar market works. But as a guitar owner, if you break your headstock, like I say, in the moment it feels like the most horrific thing you've ever experienced. It's not. It's particularly if it's a nice clean break, it is repairable. It's not like a complete write-off of your pride and joy, so don't worry too much about that. I know it's easier said than done, but important thing is what we've been talking about. So if you understand the way that the guitar is built and where the risks might be, you can look after your guitar and avoid the chances of that happening anyway. Okay, that's all for now. Hopefully that's given you some insights into the way that guitars are built, and perhaps make you realise that although these sort of accidents happen to Gibson style guitars, it's not a Gibson problem, it's a construction problem. So don't think because you've got a guitar that's not made by Gibson but it's got an angled headstock, you're not immune. You still need to treat your guitar with some respect. Any guitar with respect, but if it's got an angled headstock that's made the way that a Gibson headstock is, then there's some things to be aware of, and treat it with some caution, and you'll avoid any sort of accidents. Of course, if you want to treat your guitar with some respect, one of the best things you can do is play with some PhatPhish guitar picks, which are available from here. Blatant plug over with. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button down there, and if you really enjoyed it and you want to see other videos that I post on the channel, then please click the subscribe button, which is also down there somewhere. You're welcome to leave a comment. It's always good to hear comments from people. I don't always get notified by YouTube when people leave comments on videos though. So if there's something that you do particularly want to draw my attention to, if you've got a question about guitars, guitar playing, music theory, anything at all, you're better off going here. If you send me an email to that address, it'll come directly to me, I'll see it, and I can get around to answering your question in a future video. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.